If you've ever wondered how the only capital city on earth to grow wine by the acre turns a vineyard planted with a dozen different grapes at once into a single bottle, or how one small lakeside town once bought its very freedom with barrels of sweet wine, and many more secrets besides, stay with us. Wachau. Along a dramatic bend of the Danube, the Wachau is Austria's most famous wine region, its steep slopes carved into hundreds of narrow stone terraces built by hand over centuries. Here 2 white grapes reign, Grüner Veltliner, peppery and bright, and Riesling, taut and mineral, both drawn from ancient rock and thin soils. The Wachau grades its dry whites by ripeness on a scale all its own, the Featherlight Steinfeder, the classic Fader Spiel, and the powerful Sma Racht, the last named after a small emerald-green lizard that basks on the warm terrace walls. No oak, no sweetness, nothing to hide behind. These are among the most precise dry white wines in the world, and the vineyards that make them are so steep that every grape is still picked by hand. The region's top growers also bind themselves by a strict code, the Vinia Wachau, that bans additives and concentration, so the bottle holds only what the terrace gave. Weinviertel. North of Vienna stretches the Weinviertel, the wine quarter, the largest vineyard region in Austria, a rolling sea of vines reaching to the Czech border. This is the heartland of Grüner Veltliner, grown here in such quantity that the grape and the place are almost the same idea. In 2002, the Weinviertel became Austria's very first DAC, the country's protected appellation system, in which a regional name guarantees a wine made in that region's typical style. The wine the region is known for has a signature all its own, a spicy little kick of white pepper the Austrians affectionately call Pfefferl. It is the everyday white of Vienna's wine taverns and the friendly face of Austrian wine abroad. Campdal. Following the small Camp River down toward the Danube, the Campdal is one of Austria's top regions for Grüner Veltliner and Riesling, rivaling the neighboring Wachau. Its most celebrated vineyard is a single steep hill called the Heiligen Stein, the Holy Stone, though the name is thought to be a twist on an older word for hell, a nod to how fiercely the slope traps the heat. The rock itself is extraordinary, a desert sandstone laid down some 270 million years ago, studded with ancient volcanic material, unlike almost any other vineyard soil in Europe. Rieslings grown on it carry a smoky, spicy depth that bottles from just a few hundred feet away cannot match. It is a reminder that in Austria, as in few other places, the ground itself is the whole story. Kremstal. Around the old wine town of Krems, where the Wachau opens out, lies the Kremstal, a region that shares its famous neighbors' grapes without its crowds. Grüner Veltliner and Riesling again lead, but the ground beneath them changes. Alongside the hard primary rock of the river terraces, the Kremstal is built on deep beds of loess, a fine, powdery, wind-blown soil left behind by Ice Age dust storms. That loess gives Grüner Veltliner a rounder, riper, more generous shape, full of ripe orchard fruit rather than sharp stone. The town of Krems has grown and sold wine for over 1,000 years, one of the oldest wine towns in the country. Here the great terraced drama of the Wachau softens into something gentler, but no less serious in the glass. Vienna. Alone among the great capitals of the world, Vienna grows wine commercially within its own city limits, nearly 2,000 acres of vineyard climbing the hills at the edge of the metropolis. Its signature is a wine found almost nowhere else, the Wiener Gemischter Satz, the Viennese field blend. By tradition, many different grape varieties are planted together in a single vineyard, then picked and pressed and fermented all at once, rather than blended later from separate vats. The result is a fresh, balanced, harmonious white that is more than the sum of its grapes, and today it carries its own protected DAC. Much of it is poured young in the city's Hohe Riescher, the wine taverns that open when a pine branch is hung above the door to signal the new vintage is ready. Thermenregion. South of Vienna, named for its warm mineral springs, the Thermenregion is home to 2 white grapes so rare they are grown almost nowhere else on earth. Zierfandler and Rotgipfler, often blended together, produce a rich, full-bodied, spicy white with real aging power, most famously around the village of Gumpoldskirchen. For centuries, these were prized wines, exported across the old Habsburg Empire, and the village name was once as familiar on wine lists as any in Europe. The 2 grapes nearly vanished in the modern rush to plant international varieties, surviving on just a few hundred acres, kept alive by growers who refused to let them go. To drink a Gumpoldskirchner today is to taste something that exists in only one small corner of the world. Carnuntum, east of Vienna, on the plain where the Danube once marked the frontier of the Roman Empire. The Carnuntum region is named after a great Roman city whose ruins still stand there. This is red wine country, and its flagship is Zweigelt, the most widely planted red grape in all of Austria. Zweigelt is a thoroughly modern creation, bred in 1922 by a scientist named Fritz Zweigelt, who crossed two native grapes, Blaufränkisch and secretly-Chardonnay, to produce a vine that ripened reliably in the cool Austrian climate. The result is a juicy, deep-colored, cherry-scented red, smooth and easy to love. From a laboratory cross barely a century old, Zweigelt has become the red that Austria drinks more than any other, a national grape with a very precise birthday. Neusiedlersee. On the Hungarian border lies Lake Neusiedl, a vast, shallow steppe lake nowhere deeper than a few feet, ringed with reeds and vineyards. The lake has no natural outlet, and in autumn it breathes a constant damp mist over the surrounding vines. That mist is the secret, because it encourages a benevolent fungus called noble rot, which shrivels the grapes and concentrates their sugar into liquid gold. The sweetest of them are picked by hand, berry by shriveled berry, a whole afternoon of work for a single bottle. The region is famous for two things at once: deeply colored Zweigelt reds grown on the warm flats, and some of the finest sweet wines in the world made along the shore. Few places swing so easily between a hearty everyday red and a dessert wine worth more than its weight in silver, all thanks to a lake that never drains. Rust. On the western shore of that same lake sits the tiny town of Rust, whose name has been tied to sweet wine for so long that the two are inseparable. Its specialty is Ruster Ausbruch, a lusciously sweet wine made from grapes shriveled by noble rot, historically ranked among the greatest dessert wines of Europe. Rust prized its wine so highly that in 1681, the townspeople made an extraordinary bargain. They paid the emperor a fortune in gold, along with some 8,000 gallons of their precious Ausbruch wine, in exchange for the status of a free city answerable only to the crown. They bought their independence, quite literally, with barrels of sweet wine. The town still makes Ausbruch today, and it still wears the freedom that wine once purchased. Mittelburgenland. Just to the south, the Mittelburgenland has staked its whole reputation on a single red grape, Blaufränkisch, so completely that the region is nicknamed Blaufränkischland. Blaufränkisch is Austria's most serious red, a late-ripening, deeply colored grape with firm tannins, dark berry fruit, and a peppery, spicy edge, capable of aging for decades in the best bottles. Grown here on heavy clay soils and often matured in oak, it produces powerful, structured wines that stand comparison with the great reds of the wider world. For years, Austrian red wine was dismissed abroad as an afterthought to its whites, until a new generation of ambitious growers here in the 1990s proved the country could bottle a serious red at all. Blaufränkisch from this small region, more than any other wine, is what changed that verdict and proved the country could make reds to be reckoned with. Eisenberg. Further south again, in the narrow strip of Südburgenland, the Eisenberg region takes its name directly from the ground, the Iron Mountain. The soils here are unusually rich in iron, tinting the earth a rusty red, and the Blaufränkisch grown on them tastes noticeably different from its cousins to the north. These are leaner, more mineral wines, with a savory, almost bloody, iron-like tang that growers proudly trace straight to the ferrous soil beneath the vines. It is one of Austria's smallest and least known wine regions, a quiet patchwork of tiny vineyards and old cellar lanes, its bottles rarely seen outside the country. Yet for those who seek it out, Eisenberg Blaufränkisch offers something unusual, the rare sensation of tasting the very metal in the ground the wine grew from. Uhudler. This same corner of Südburgenland is the home of one of the strangest wines in Europe, the Uhudler, made not from ordinary wine grapes but from American hybrid vines brought over to resist disease in the late 1800s. Their wine has a wild, musky, strawberry and fox aroma that the French dismissively call foxy, and for much of the 20th century Austrian authorities tried to stamp it out, at times banning its sale outright, claiming it was unhealthy and even that it could cause madness. Growers hid their vines and made it anyway, and the outlawed country wine became a symbol of local defiance. Today, Uhudler is legal again, a protected regional specialty sold to curious visitors, its whiff of scandal now part of the charm. Few wines have been so loved by their makers and so hated by their government. Südsteiermark. In the far south, tumbling down steep green hills along the Slovenian border, southern Styria is Austria's most beautiful wine country and the kingdom of Sauvignon Blanc. Grown on these cool, sharp slopes, Styrian Sauvignon Blanc is racy and aromatic, full of green herbs, citrus, and flint, ranking among the best expressions of the grape anywhere. The region hides its own quiet secret in the glass. The grape the locals call Mor Ion, which appears on labels as if it were a native variety, is in fact ordinary Chardonnay under an old regional name. The hillsides are so steep that many can only be worked by hand, and the landscape of vine-covered ridges and wooden windmills has become as much a draw for visitors as the wine itself. Those windmills, called klopotets, turn in the breeze and clatter to scare birds from the ripening grapes, and have become the emblem of the whole region. Weststeiermark. A little to the west lies a region devoted almost entirely to one fierce and unusual wine, the Schilcher, a rosé of blazing pink color and bracing, mouth-watering acidity. It is made from a rare local grape called Blaufränkisch, grown almost nowhere else in the world, and its sharpness is so distinctive that people tend to either love it or wince at it. For centuries, it was a rustic local drink, so tart it was often left for the growers themselves. But modern winemaking has tamed its edges into something fresh and food-friendly without losing its nervy character. Deeply colored for a rosé and unmistakably sour, Schilcher is one of those wines that could come from only one place, a taste of Western Styria that has never traveled far from home. Sekt Austria. Austria makes sparkling wine too, and calls it Sekt, a tradition reaching back to the imperial court of the 19th century. In recent years, the country built a strict, three-tier pyramid of quality for its best bottles, rising from classic at the base, through reserve, to the peak called Grosse Reserve. To reach that summit, a Sekt must come from a single wine region, be made by the traditional method with its bubbles formed inside the very bottle it is sold in, and spend 3 years developing on the yeast before it is hand-turned and disgorged. The result rivals fine sparkling wine anywhere, dry, complex, and precise. It is the same painstaking method used in Champagne, applied to Austria's crisp, mountain-fresh grapes, and it completes the picture of a country that now does almost everything with wine, and does it seriously. For all this range, from stony Wachau whites to iron-red Blaufränkisch and hand-turned Sekt, modern Austrian wine was born out of catastrophe. In 1985, a handful of merchants were caught lacing cheap wine with a chemical found in antifreeze to fake richness, a scandal that wrecked the country's exports almost overnight and forced through what became the strictest wine law in the world. From that ruin, Austria rebuilt itself into one of the most respected wine nations on earth, trading quantity for a fierce, hard-won quality. Let us know in the comments which wine country we should uncork next.